My name is Bob Fafinski, and I have the honor of introducing my law partner, business partner, and friend, Donald Chance Mark Jr., as one of the 2015 Distinguished Alumni Award winners for Minnetonka High School. I first met Don in the spring of 1983. In May of that year, I graduated from law school and joined the large downtown law firm of Meagher Geer, Markham, Anderson, Adamson, Flaskamp, and Brennan as an associate attorney. And by the way, you had to be able to pronounce the name of the firm in order to get a job at Meagher Geer, Markham, Anderson, Adamson, Flaskamp, and Brennan. The firm was one of the best-known trial law firms in the state of Minnesota. And by the spring of 1983, Don had already spent 10 or 11 years at the firm and was already an entrenched, superb trial lawyer. On the other hand, I was a freshly minted, wet-behind-the-ears young lawyer excited to join this prestigious law firm located in the upper floors of the IDS Tower. During that spring of 1983, Don was in the midst of representing TWA in connection with Flight 841. TWA Flight 841 involved a Boeing 727 that departed from New York bound for the Twin Cities. During the flight, the aircraft experienced an uncontrolled spin, resulting in the aircraft plunging 34,000 feet in 44 seconds. By some miracle, the flight crew pulled the airplane out of the uncontrolled dive just seconds before impact. The 82 passengers on board the plane survived, but brought a lawsuit against TWA, and Don was assigned the task of defending the airline. For those of you that don't remember this trial, it was on the local and national news for weeks, and 60 Minutes did a docudrama about the incident. I started at the firm in the midst of that trial. Day after day, Don would go to the courthouse, and each night he would return to our offices in the IDS Tower and spend evenings working with other lawyers and witnesses preparing for the next day of trial. Many evenings I would walk by Don's office, and my initial impression was, wow, is he tall. In fact, I thought he was a giant, probably close to 7 foot tall. It wasn't until a few weeks later when I ran into him in the hallway that I realized that he, in fact, is not 7 foot tall, but a bit shorter than that. Unbeknownst to me, Don had actually been standing on a radiator hidden behind his desk, which is about 18 inches off the ground. When I asked him why he stood on the radiator, he told me that he could think better at a higher altitude. Well, Don's been thinking at a higher altitude ever since. When Don asked me to introduce him for today's award, I was taken back by the honor of doing so, and it gave me the opportunity to sit down and talk with my friend about his time growing up in the Minnetonka area. As some of you know, Don grew up on Lake Minnetonka, not too far from Excelsior. If you didn't know it, Don's father was a captain with Northwest Airlines and his mother was a flight attendant until she stayed home with the family. As some of you may know, Don grew up on Lake Minnetonka, not too far from Excelsior. If you didn't know, Don's father was a captain with Northwest Airlines and his mother was a flight attendant until she stayed home with the family. Don's father had the foresight after World War II to find a site on Lake Minnetonka to build a house and raise a family. In talking with Don, it sounds like his childhood was fairly idyllic. Lots of boating, fishing, sailing, skating, and whatever the day's weather would bring, the family adapted and undertook those activities. As a captain at an airline back in the glory days of flying, Don Sr. was a bit of an alpha male. In fact, Don and some of his high school friends would refer to Don Sr. as the dictator because when Don Sr. returned from a 4 or 5 day trip, he would start barking orders at the kids and whoever happened to be around the house, including high school friends who were quickly assigned household chores. All these years later, I actually see some of Don Sr. and Don Jr., but I mean that in a good way. When Don is getting ready for a trial or is working on an important matter, there is no doubt as to who is the captain of the ship. Don is clear, and concise in his expectations of people, and he offers great leadership and strategic insight into how he represents his clients and conducts his professional life. When Don and I started talking about his high school years, it became clear to me that this was the time that he really blossomed. In fact, Don said that he would have loved to have had a 5th year of high school, perhaps a redshirt year, in that he really found himself during the last couple years of high school. He was always interested in athletics, having played some football and hockey, but because of his size limitations, he realized he had to develop into some other areas. So he ran for senior class president and won the election. He was voted most likely to succeed in his class. He worked on the yearbook, and he also did the play-by-play for the radio broadcasts of the basketball team in their exciting 1965 run to the state championship. And it's clear that of all the highlights that Don recalls from high school, that the experience of that 1965 team was very important in Don's life, and perhaps in the lives of those of his classmates that are in attendance today. 50 years later, I can tell that this is still an important event in Don's life, not only because of the achievement itself, but because of the way it brought the entire high school together. Don moved on to St. Olaf and ultimately to Vanderbilt Law School, where he not only attained a law degree, but also a serious relationship with a Southern girl by the name of Jane. Of all of Don's amazing accomplishments, perhaps the one that stands out most is that somehow he convinced this Southern girl who had never been exposed to snow in winter to move to Minnesota, marry him, and spend the next 40 years here in the Northland. Don and Jane have created a wonderful family. Donnie, Robbie and his wife Katie, and their new son Robbie, as well as Ashley and her husband Justin, and their daughter Finley, and now another addition to Ashley's family expected sometime this fall. Also included in Don's family are a host of dogs, cats, koi fish, and a very large pet pig named Rosie. Now back to my comment about Don always being in charge and the captain of his professional endeavors. He is clearly an enlisted man at home. Like many of you, after graduation from college and law school, Don had a military commitment and he served in the U.S. Army as a second lieutenant with distinction. From a career standpoint, most trial lawyers only dream to have the sort of career that Don has had. He's tried over 130 trials in his career, including approximately 100 jury trials. He has been repeatedly named a super lawyer over the last 15 years, and twice has been named as one of the 100 best lawyers in Minnesota. At an age when most people are slowing down, Don has been named one of Minnesota's Attorneys of the Year by the Minnesota Lawyer twice after the age of 60. His most recent honor came just last year when one of his cases was argued before the United States Supreme Court. Don had the honor of sitting at counsel table during arguments in front of the highest court in the land. And by the way, of course, our client prevailed. Don is just hitting his stride. He's at the very top of his game in a very demanding profession. Clients seek Don out for strategic advice and for handling sensitive matters. In the law business, a lot of people make jokes about lawyers but when someone really needs advice or assistance at a tough time, it's awfully nice to have someone like Don advocating for you. I think as Don has gotten a bit older, the things that are most important to him are representing those that are being picked on or those that cannot defend themselves. Don seems to rise to the occasion when the situation is most egregious. Don has had a magnificent career, and those of you connected to Minnetonka High School should be extraordinarily proud that one of your alumni has developed into such a fine attorney, and most importantly, a wonderful human being. When I decided to form Fafinski Mark Johnson, I asked Don to join me, not only because of his trial skills, but also because of his leadership abilities. Our firm has flourished in the 16 years since, and now we employ 27 attorneys and almost 50 people. If I serve as the leader of our firm, then Don serves as the conscience of our firm. His zealous commitment to excellence and his mentoring of the young lawyers at our firm are legendary. The attributes that describe him best in my mind are the fact that he is courageous and at times fearless, especially when advocating on behalf of his clients. However, he is also measured and strategic. He is one of those rare individuals who oftentimes knows what will happen in advance of it happening because he is such a great observer of human nature. I think that one of his most important attributes is his loyalty. He's a clan guy, and what I mean by that is when the chips are down or when there is a challenge, he will always rally around his clan. And I would assume that those in his family have seen that sort of behavior, and for sure those of us that work with him have seen it. I am so incredibly honored to be the person that Don asked to introduce him for this prestigious award. Given the importance that his friends, teachers, and classmates at Minnetonka High School have in his life, I can assure you that this is probably one of the most important awards that Don has ever received. Don, even though I now know that you are not 7 foot tall, you will always be a giant to me and to those who admire you, respect you, and love you. Congratulations, partner.
I'm going to have to adjust this because I'm not 7 foot tall. So, when I was contacted regarding this recognition, I had several emotions. The first was surprise. The second was feeling honored, and the third was being humbled. And I stand here today before you feeling those same emotions. I did want to learn more about the award, and so I did some research, and I wanted to specifically find out something about all of the past recipients. I got a hold of all of the biographies, and I looked at each and every one. And I wasn't surprised, but what a remarkable group of people have come from this high school. Every single one of the past recipients have done remarkable things in their lives and in their careers. And it was just awesome to read that, and it's no different today as I've read all of the information that's been published on all of the recipients. But also, as I looked at that information, I found a glaring omission that I really didn't understand. Doctors have been honored here, teachers have been honored here, writers have been honored here, a playwright has been honored here, social workers and the like, all well-deserving. Not one single lawyer has ever been on this podium. And I wondered about that. It caused me some concern. So I decided that I would conduct my own research to come up with the answer as to why that is. What better place to come to conduct the research than right here, a place of learning. And so I came. The school has dramatically changed from when I was last here. But I went to the library. Principal Erickson, are you aware of the fact that you do not have a library in this building? I could not find any room that's marked as library in this building, not one. You have something called the port. I thought the port was either the left side of a boat, or maybe where you dropped anchor, or maybe it's even a wine. Does the superintendent know that you've named your library after a wine? I was shocked. But in any event, I went in, and I also found a second shock, and that was that there are very few books in your library. And as a result, none of the ones that I relied upon were there. No World Book, no Encyclopedia Britannica, no Cliff's Notes, and not even a Webster's Dictionary. So I was about ready to leave when a fifth grader showed up from Clear Springs, and she was able to help me with my search. And what I learned is the reason that lawyers have not been honored here before, and perhaps in other places, is that we can blame it on Bill. And I'm going to talk about Bill in just a second, but when you think about us historically, all of the lawyers that have made a difference in our lives. The second president of the United States John Adams was a lawyer, and a trial lawyer at that. The 16th President of the United States, Abraham Lincoln, was a lawyer, and a trial lawyer at that. Adams served in the 1700s, Lincoln served in the 1800s, and in the 1900s, any number of great trial lawyers appeared. Jerry Spence, Louis Nizer, Clarence Darrow, just to name a few. So I wanted to get the research, and what I did is, with the help of this fifth grader, I started looking, and I found a very influential writer named Bill, who had written a variety of things over the course of several years. And he wrote about strife, he wrote about war, he wrote about all kinds of things that were happening in government. And one of the things that he had written were these words: the first thing we do, let's kill all the lawyers. Now that appeared in a work called Henry VI in the 1590s. And it was written by a guy named Bill, or perhaps better known to some of you as William Shakespeare. So I had my answer. If all of the students in this country, and particularly in this institution, for the last 400 plus years have been told to kill the lawyers, what chance do we have? I will tell you that it's been my privilege to serve as a trial lawyer. I will tell you that it's been my privilege to serve in an environment where we resolve our differences in a courtroom with decorum and with rules, not on the streets with violence or with guns. I will tell you that it's been my privilege to represent the underrepresented, to represent those that haven't had a voice, to represent the powerless against the strong and the powerful. My training for this started in this school district, Minnetonka Elementary School, Excelsior Junior High, Minnetonka High School. Great teachers in every one of those schools. And great role models on top of it, not just people that we saw in the classroom, but people that we saw in the community that served as role models for all of us. All of that allowed me to then go on to my secondary education, my law school education and beyond, and allowed me to have the career that I've been blessed to have. I want to thank the Alumni Association. I want to thank all of you, and particularly I want to thank the students of the class of 1965 that are here today. So many of you have come out. I will tell you what an extraordinary class we have. We started having reunions at year 5, and we've had them on regular intervals ever since. And this evening we will be enjoying each other as we always do and reconnecting for our 50th reunion. I appreciate my classmates and all you've done to support me. I appreciate my family, my wife, the Southern girl from 42 years, who has supported me through long trials, long tribulations, and my family. All 3 of my children are graduates from this institution. And I can report to you that we have a 1-year-old grandchild who lives within the district, and if his grandmother and I have anything to say about it someday, he will be graduating from this institution as well. Let me leave you with these thoughts. In 1963, Martin Luther King sat in a jail in Birmingham, Alabama. And he was there because he'd been arrested as a result of leading something in those days called a Freedom March. He had a lot of time to think and a lot of time to write. And one of the things he wrote so simply and eloquently was this: injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And I found that to be true in my career. And he also wrote that any time to do the right thing is the right time. So as I leave you, think of these 4 words the next time you're in a group that's telling a lawyer joke or bashing lawyers or blaming all of our social ills on lawyers. These 4 words: blame it on Bill.